Welcome to Let's Talk Health, powered by VitifyHealth. I'm your host, Miles Wingfield, and today we're joined by a board-certified internal medicine physician with more than a decade of experience spanning clinical care, healthcare leadership, and digital health innovation. She graduated from Stanford School of Medicine, completed her residency at Harvard Medical School, and practiced at Massachusetts General Hospital before co-founding Resonant Health. Resonant Health helps licensed primary care physicians launch and scale private practices by combining licensed remote physicians with workflow automation. Resonant Health streamlines practices by automating EHR tasks, generating summaries, and synthesizing structured and unstructured patient data, giving physicians more time to focus on providing quality care. And with that, please welcome Dr. Akhila Narla. Akhila, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So I'd just like to get straight into it. I would love to start with Resonant Health and just hear more about it. Here at Vitify Health, we're using AI to automate a lot of clinical trial workflows for patient recruitment. So as AI continues to transform healthcare, what inspired you to start Resonant Health? And what do you ultimately hope its impact will be on clinical workflows and physician well-being?
Yes, no, thank you so much for giving me the chance to talk about it. I know I was so inspired learning about your journey starting Vitify Health from your own experiences. And that's similar to what happened here with Resonant Health is that practicing in primary care as physicians, we're very driven to do the best that we can for our patients. And oftentimes in an employed model, the workflow is such that do more and more with less and less time. And I think it's often really hard to respect the doctor-patient relationship, give our attention to our patients, knowing that there's so much that we have to do manually behind the scenes on our own time during lunch, at home, on the weekends, during vacation.
Right.
And I think that, it's really important to have a doctor who cares about you from your own experiences, advocating for all of those things outside of the face-to-face medicine, the community resources, the research, everything. And I want to be able to do that for my patients. And so Resonant Health is how do we keep doctors in the game? Because either they burn out, they retire early, or they go super part-time. And, we have an issue with accessing doctors and accessing the same doctor who knows you and who's really your advocate. And so what I imagined was not only a tool to help people who want to stay in the employed model. There's a lot of people that work within large health systems, like having all that support, but want to be able to do their jobs more efficiently. But also doctors who are resources for their community, whether it's their cultural community, whether it's their specific topics that they're interested in, and they want to be able to use their skills to be their own business. And I think right now, for both sides, things are in the works, but they haven't penetrated the market yet. And really, they're not being led by people who have lived and breathed that workflow, which is why I think it's important for doctors and people who have lived the pain point to design the solutions from the ground up. And so what Resonant Health does, just in a very basic level, is simulates what the primary care doctor has to do, whether you're an employed
Right.
physician or whether you have your own clinic, which basically, if you have your own business as a primary care doctor, you just need your license, a patient, and a computer system. And
There you
so
go.
we try to make it as simple as possible because there's a lot of ways to fluff it up and have all these extra things that don't need to be done. But we just try to go down to first principles, simplify what actually needs to be done to take care of the patient and coordinate their care, and integrate with the systems that already exist, whether you're starting from scratch, which is a lot easier to do, reimagining from the ground up at a smaller scale with individual clinics, or integrating within the existing workflows for bigger communities. So we're trying to do both at the same time, but the ultimate goal for me was to keep doctors in the game so that patients can see their doctors and we can love what we do every day.
Yeah, I think that's what I really love about Resonant Health is not only does it help our physicians spend more time doing what they really love, is providing that quality care, but it also helps us as patients, right? Have a physician who has to spend less time working about the mundane workflows and actually providing that time. So that's one thing I really love about Resonant Health. And just to talk a little bit more about what you've experienced in your career is, um, I guess as an internal medicine attending who's worked across FQACs, private practices, and academic clinics, I said, what are the biggest workflow differences you've noticed across these settings, and how do you think Resonant Health might fit into these different settings?
Yeah, I think that across these settings, the biggest issue is in-network care, right? FQHCs deal with, especially in California, which we both are in California, a lot of Medi-Cal. 1 in 4 Californians have Medi-Cal, so Medicaid in other states is what it's called. And so those have a lot of regulations. That's a lot of what FQHCs deal with, where they have to navigate that landscape. And then private practices, you can choose to take insurance, you can choose not to. And I think when it's just cash payment, you can be really creative in how that care is delivered remotely, in person, through, you don't have to worry as much about documentation and billing codes. And then academic, you really have a responsibility to integrate within a larger system. And so having the chance to kind of work in all these settings helps me realize, there's reasons why innovations are easier in some of these landscapes. So our first customer was an FQHC, and because of federal funding cuts, that actually impacted their ability to roll out the pilot, because they had to close departments, they had to fire physicians for the first time in a long time. So, they as clinics are a lot more dependent on federal policies. And then academics, you have a lot of bureaucracy and layers. And then private clinics are really easy to work with, which is why we kind of started there. But private clinics, you have the option to take whatever insurances you want. You have the option to, maybe have cash pay wealthier patients to offset free care for, not as well off patients. And so it's the ability to kind of focus on all of those worlds by Resonant Health focusing on that. But I love all the people that work in all those practices settings. They're all just there to serve in whatever way they can.
Yeah, I think again, Resonant Health being such a diverse tool or diverse solution for so many different ways to fit it in, it's really cool, and I'm excited to see its future. And to ask you more about, I guess, you on a like how do you manage it? You wear so many different hats. You're a physician, a medical director, startup CEO. Like, how do you balance these roles day to day, and what system or mindset shifts have helped you make it work in such a busy lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as all of us, you have worked really hard. I think work is
Thank
work,
you.
right? Like, you're learning to get those 10,000 hours in, you're trying to do your job really well. So it's not like the training process wasn't intense. So the fact that I'm wearing multiple hats is more just because I'm used to trying to do a lot with the time that I have, because there's a lot to be done. But I think it all goes together. At the end of the day, I'm a primary care physician. And what I'm trying to do is do that job better for not only myself, but scale that impact. And so when I see patients, it reminds me every day of what their pain points are and what my colleagues' pain points are, and how I can navigate that and innovate and try to really bridge that gap. And then when I'm in my role as a medical director, which is still part-time, I'm able to innovate and bring the technology that we're building in Resonant Health to that role as medical director, and trying to see, if I'm actually solving for pain points that make sense in the real day-to-day life of people making financial decisions, making workflow decisions. And then leading a startup, that's just a 24/7 thing. Sometimes it's more
Definitely.
busy, sometimes it's not as busy. Sometimes I have to intentionally say, okay, this can wait. But it's just really fun to be working on something that I think is going to make something better and be my unique impact on the world. And so it all goes together, but definitely it's intentional to strike a balance, because otherwise it could never end. It hasn't been
Yeah.
solved yet. So once it's been solved, I can rest. But for now, we just keep keeping on.
Definitely. That's something I 100% relate to. And again, we met at Breakthrough VC, and I just want to take a minute to give just a huge shout out to Roman Scott and Itban Nafi. And so how would you describe that experience at Breakthrough VC, and what did you take away from being in like a founder focused, high pressure, well, maybe not to you, but environment?
Yeah, no, I remember our first gathering where we all got on that call together, and it was everyone's faces and we introduced each other. And I remember just kind of getting teary eyed at one of the things that, was mentioned, that, it starts with like somebody believing in you. And I think that that was really what I felt throughout Breakthrough, is obviously being so inspired by everybody around, but just feeling like it was this momentum to say, okay, somebody has believed in us. And, obviously being affiliated with Stanford and being in the Bay Area, it was really fun to kind of be in sort of that spotlight. But I think what I really loved through that experience was meeting all of you and seeing everybody succeeding in their own ways and trying to solve these things. And hopefully all of us are going to patch together what we're working on as we grow, because
I
I
hope
think we're
so.
all hitting really important points that could definitely work together, especially if the tech fits together.
Yeah, definitely. I also have a very similar experience. Obviously, Roman, met him here at Berkeley, actually, him being a Stanford guy, and just to have that opportunity to be around people making such impactful companies, such impactful decisions at a lot of people being at young ages. It was a really great experience for me as well. And I did want to ask you again about some startup challenges that you've seen. So, in your experience, like what's been the hardest part of building a healthcare tech startup, and while again still practicing medicine?
Yeah, I think I was telling you a bit about this offline, but I think I
Hmm.
thought it was going to be a lot easier than it was. And we know
Hmm.
this in neuroscience that the key to happiness is low expectations. And that if you have these high expectations, you're just going to be disappointed. And I think I just, being in the Bay Area, Berkeley, I was at Stanford, it's just like you think, oh, everyone can just like go raise money and just build a startup if they're smart. And I think what I realized is that, everybody has a lot of good ideas. It's about execution, but getting in that, inflow of capital, really, you have to be somebody not just who is smart and capable, but who has shown that you've taken a company from 0 to 1, exited, got acquired. And I think kind of
Hmm.
one of my lessons about the startup world is that when you're doing it for the first time at this scale, you have to have that confidence yourself, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't have even got
100%.
something off the ground. It takes that to just start and to keep going. But I think to just be patient, right? Like there will
Hmm.
always be that person who keeps believing in you. And that's kind of what happens like day to day. Like there's just someone who's like cheering me on. And so then you just keep going for however long it takes. And I think that what I've seen is a lot of the people who really truly find not just founder market fit, but product market fit, keep going, keep pivoting, keep waiting, and then eventually, that capital will kind of launch to the next step. But I think just being patient and knowing that you can believe in yourself and know that you're the right person to do it, but that doesn't mean it's not the right idea just because not everyone can see that yet.
100%. I think I've learned similar lessons about patience and keeping confidence, even when sometimes it doesn't look like you should have it. But I guess looking ahead at those next steps that you mentioned, what do you see are the next steps for Resonant Health, and what do you see it long-term vision? What's your really long-term vision for it?
Yeah. I mean, in the short term, I just have a bunch of really interesting meetings that are lined up, with people in the investor world, people who have launched their health tech startups as physician founders and getting to travel around, meet them virtual, but also in person. And I get to do that this week. And, just keep being around people who inspire me. But long term, I want to be that physician CEO who
Hmm.
found a need and found a market. Obviously, there's a lot of money in healthcare, but it can go to things that are really mission driven too. And I
Hmm.
think that is my goal, is that every doctor who wants a compassionate role and a patient who wants to connect with that doctor, they'll find each other and they can stay with each other. And you don't have to constantly reintroduce yourself as a patient to the next doctor, hope they care enough. And as a doctor, you don't have to feel like to care about that patient, you have to do everything on your own time, find all those resources, that you just have that tech stack, you have that operating system that just communicates with everybody you need to be able to get the job done for your patient. And that is my goal, a world where this access and quality issue is just no longer the thing that we all talk about a broken system, and then it just never gets fixed.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a beautiful goal, and I really hope that I wish you nothing but success. And for my last question, I kind of want to keep it more light. So obviously, you went to Stanford Medical School. You got your you did your residency at Harvard Medicine. What would your advice be to maybe that young undergrad embarking on this pre-med journey where it's like it seems very daunting, right? So many years of school, such intense. Like, how would you encourage them, or what piece of advice would you give to that pre-med student?
Yes. Well, I would have them shadow me and keep talking to me, because you just always are going to need advice. It's not like a one time thing. And I would say, it has to come from within, obviously. Like some people just got in their mind, like, okay, someone told me to become a doctor and I'll become one. But I think, as a pre med, you have to really know why you're doing it. And sometimes you kind of fake it till you make it, because you don't really know what medicine is until you get in. But I would just say, find that person that you think like is doing something super cool and just have them be your mentor and be your friend and talk to them, because it's the humans who do medicine that kind of infuse the humanity in it when you're going through the training, and it's just work, sleepless nights, all these tests. We call it like the fire hose of information that's thrown at
Yeah.
you. And, just someone who keeps you in the human part of it, because yes, you want to be the smartest person, you want to know all the biochemical pathways, you want to have really good bedside manner, you want to answer questions really well if someone asks you, but at the end of the day, you're human and you want to know how to use the resources at your fingertips. And so people who encourage you to not just feel like you have to memorize, but you're learning how to learn.
Hmm.
And sometimes we just get caught in that in the pre-med like training that we need to have it all at the top of our brain. But the world is very accessible technologically. So I think just
Hmm.
knowing that you can always look up and being more comfortable saying, you know what, I don't know, but I can look it up. And it doesn't always reward that in the training process. So people to remind you what the real world is like after that.
I think that's a great piece of advice, and I thank you for that. And thank you again, Aquilas. And well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have today. This has been Let's Talk Health, powered by Vitify Health. If you're interested in learning more about Dr. Akhila Narla and her impactful work, or the work we do here at Vitify Health, feel free to check us out in the links in the description. Thank you, and we'll see you soon. Akhila, thank you again.
Thank you. Take care.